So the next speaker is Igor Ivanov, content director of Setka. His approach really resonated with me. So Igor, with great pleasure, I'm looking forward to your speech. Welcome.
Слышно, видно.
Hello. Can you see and hear me? Yes. There is a very short lag in the connection, but I think it will improve. We can see and hear you. That's good. Perfect. Well, I think it's finally synchronized. Perfect. So, as per tradition, let's welcome our guest with the fires. Once you're ready, please tell me and I'll launch your presentation. Yes, you can start. I'm ready to delve into them straight away and hopefully share an interesting story with you on this Friday night. So, what is the origin of stories? Where do they come from? Well, we're adults, but we'll try to ask this question. So first and foremost, let's get to know each other. My name is Igor, and recently I went to a bar. Well, it could be a beginning of a funny story, right? Well, in a bar, I got to know a man. We had a talk. He asked me who I was. So this is the standard question, right? For some reason, the pages of the presentation are a little bit slow. So what did I say? I said, hi, I'm Igor. I'm content director in Setka, the headhunter product. Well, if I introduced myself the same way at this conference, it would sound fine, right? It's a good beginning of a story because here we gathered to talk about stories as professionals, right? And I was invited here to come here as the content director of Setka. But when I was speaking in a bar, I had a wide range of choices. I could say that I'm from Belgrade. I could say that I can play ping pong. I could say that I'm a good swimmer. So how did I choose the role for self-determination there? I focused on my work. I know that many people do this. So I often ask these questions to my friends. How do you introduce yourselves? And I usually start talking about my work, even if the context doesn't require it. And it's clear why it is so, because our work defines us in many ways. And if you tell about your work, other people will understand your social circle, what topics they're interested in, what you know, and what you probably don't know. Well, just imagine if two people are from one and the same sphere and they meet each other for the first time, it becomes easier for them to understand each other and to share stories because work really unites us. And many people are willing to share stories related to work. But is there an interesting story? Is there something in the story that is worth our attention? So probably over these days of the conference, the speakers have touched upon the topic of what makes a story interesting or good. And there probably may be many definitions of a good story. But today, I'd like to focus on a story that gives us new information, gives us some unique information, or shows us a different perspective on a certain topic. Or it can be a story which resonates with us. So, for example, there's something in common between us and the character, and then the story, if it is told well, can become really engaging. So we all like to introduce ourselves through talking about our work. So based on my experience, I can say that I worked in media sphere, in an IT sphere. Well, I would say it's a typical experience. Many specialists have gone through this career path, and actually it's not very interesting. But I worked in media, in EdTech, and in social media. So here you can see a little bit of personalization, because now you can see media, education, and social media. So probably there's something unique about you, but still there are many such specialists who work in these spheres. It's not a unique path. In 2016, I worked in Look at Media. In 2019, I worked in the education sphere. And today, since 2023, I've been working in social media. Right, so how many people have the very same experience? Well, probably similar people, similar experience, but there are not many of them. And you can find more people who have the same last name that I have than the number of people who have exactly the same career path that I have. So this is the experience which my story is built on. So I can use this experience to explain what it was like to work in Look at Media in 2016, what it was like to work in the education tech in 2019. And if you take any person and decompose their personal path, you will see that it's unique. Of course, there can be some connections. So, for example, for 25 years, people may have worked in one and the same place with one and the same company, but nevertheless, everyone will have a unique story. And I have goosebumps because a unique story is something really amazing. And a unique story is something that I would like to focus on from now on. We have unique stories and they're really cool. Now, let's move on and talk about brands and those who are interested in storytelling. So imagine what would happen if the stories based on the unique experience were told several times per month, per week. That would be great, right? It is beneficial for people, but it's also interesting for HR brands. Why? In this case, the stories will be told about the HR brand. Here you can see the figures that will serve as the testimony to what I'm saying, but I'd like to highlight the following two important things. I've been speaking for 9 minutes and I haven't mentioned AI. I think it's 2026 and it's wrong that I haven't mentioned it yet. So let's talk about AI. With the development of such tools as ChatGPT, Codes, and others, the knowledge as is becomes available. So let's say you want to learn something. Let's say I want to learn 5 frameworks certain about a certain type of work with a group, and I can ask AI chatbot about it, Claude, for example, but they don't have the experience of use of frameworks. For example, the use of retro for the group of 5 people. And let's say I make the prompt more complicated. 10 people from different corners of the world, and they work in the ed tech, and I need these retro techniques. So Claude doesn't have this experience. If I want knowledge, I would go to one place, but if I want to learn about experience, about how this knowledge can be applied in real world, how other people applied this knowledge, and how I can apply this knowledge. If I have these questions, I will need stories to read. And these are the unique stories that we have, that our employees, leaders have and can speak about. These stories will be valuable. So that is the first point I wanted to say. And point two is this. On the one hand, we have a lot of AI content. The recommendation algorithms have a lot of AI, and AI content is everywhere. And people are getting tired of it, and they are trying to seek for people. For example, probably you've heard about it. I'm sure you have a profile in Telegram or Facebook, or you're part of the community, probably have a producers chat or content creators group on a messenger. And there, only real people, only live people are present, and the communication will take place there. And I think we'll see this trend growing in the nearest future. And it is very hard for a brand, the essence of brand, to permeate, to get into these spaces. Why? Because this is the space of people, and people will come there and tell their stories. They will share their stories with the communities. And a brand, HR brand, can get into these communities as well through stories. And you can create a very humanist impression because people will tell about you. And it's a great opportunity. When preparing this presentation, I wanted to have a distraction. I started watching reels. I scrolled through some of the videos. So I opened my Instagram page and I started watching reels. And the first reel that I saw was about a girl that has made a video about what happens when your employee left the company and you can see the empty desk of your colleague that used to work here. Well, I've seen similar videos, and below here you can say the hashtag about the work in Ozone company. This girl works for Ozone, and she shows the office in her reels. She shows us her daily life, what tasks she implements, how sad she becomes when her colleagues leave, and so forth. So this content enables us to see what the Ozone office looks like, and if people who work there become sad if someone leaves the company, it means that it's really good to work there. So this is just the example that I found so easily. Now, a little bit of examples. How can you find such stories? What do they look like? There's Weltery Startup. With the help of the data that is stored on devices and gadgets, they tell stories. I have a LinkedIn account profile, and among my subscribers, I have the former workers of Weltory. And when they refer to Weltory, they would say how their health improved over the time of Weltory, or what good achievements have been made by human beings within this company. And former workers would say that I worked for this company and these good things happened in my life during that time. And the Weltory decided to showcase these stories to highlight that real people work for them. They wanted to recognize those who worked for them. And the company, the experience of working for a company became part of the experience of the former workers, and they wanted to highlight that to everyone who subscribed to their channel. Another example is the browser company. It is the team company that produces Arctic browsers. These are modern browsers. They have completely revised our understanding of what a browser is. I've never seen any communication from the brand because all the stories there are presented by people. On the left, you can see an example of a newsletter with the updates about the company. And these updates are usually told by a person. So, of course, there is the editorial team that helps this particular person create the newsletter, but this is usually a letter from a real person. And in the end, this person would share a story from their personal life, not related to the company life. So this person would share what dish they cooked, what film they watched a couple of days ago, what amazing things happened to their life. Why is it so good? It makes the story personal. And this person even explains why they created this update. What is the story of their work here within the company? And they add a personal touch. This company encourages workers to do that because the employees' content is actively used. In LinkedIn, I recently subscribed to a designer of this company. And apart from the posts related to design, this person just tells about their everyday life, unrelated to their corporate life. And this way or another, he still mentions using Dia or other browsers. And for me as a user, it's interesting and it builds stronger connections with the team that produces the product that I like. As for Setka company, we are taking similar steps. As practitioners, we tell stories on behalf of the employees through the prism of their stories. Each employee shares their story in their own manner. For example, they like using emojis in their text, and that's great. Our brand doesn't have any restrictions regarding the use of emojis in communications. Well, for example, an employee uses a lot of emojis because they like it. Another employee shares on their page information about the hub of the company, or they collect or want to increase the number of subscribers. Others just share information about the product. They share what they've seen great about the product. And this helps us as a social media where people connect with each other, show that social media is also created by people. We can explain through stories how our marketing works, why we launch certain projects. And it all begins with personal stories that people share. So our employees can tell stories about work or non-work related stories. And this way or the other, they mention the product that customers use, and it improves the image of the company, of the team, and you start to understand the people that stand behind the product and the company. But why not everyone is sharing stories? It seems like you can find a story easily. Well, many people are scared that the story may come up as uninteresting. So, for example, I may have spent 2 months to find a story, and I think that this story is interesting because I specialize in this particular field, but other people won't find the story interesting. So again, we can refer to the figures. And I find interesting that people want to speak about themselves. We define ourselves through stories, and figures only support this idea. A survey was conducted by the marketing team. This was the largest survey, and the questions were asked about the social media, about sharing information about work on social media, and 60%, almost 60% are expressing their willingness to become bloggers. And by bloggers, I mean just people who share more about their everyday life in social media. And they're willing to do that if the company supports this initiative. So that's good. It means that you have someone to work with. You have someone who will support you. But we can see changes in the media consumption, in the AI tools, and the expertise of the creator ranks first today. This is supported by the survey conducted in 2026. The expertise of the expert that shares information has become of utmost importance. So for workers, employees who have 200 or 300 subscribers and they're not professional bloggers, it's a great achievement. And these subscribers are people from the inner circle, and maybe for you, they are the target audience with whom you can and should speak. And finally, how can you uncover or discover these stories? Well, let's say that, yes, you have stories, you have those who should listen to these stories, and people are willing to tell their stories. So how can you discover these stories? What mistakes can you possibly make? Or in other words, what approaches should be avoided? Employee generated content is when employees tell the stories and the company or the brand just help them do this. The first thing that we usually run into is this. All right, so we are a brand and employees must tell us something. So we'll brief them on the words that should be used, on what will be according to the guideline, what won't be according to the guideline, what word is part of the brand book, how you should do it and how you shouldn't do it. Well, this approach never works. It will never work. Why? First and foremost, no one would want to share a story with such preconditions because the stories won't be authentic. Just imagine an employee telling a story that was imposed on them. So they were told how to tell their story. The listeners will immediately see this in unauthenticity, and the story will become boring, uninteresting. And people themselves know better how to tell their own story because it is their story, and they know all the emotions, all the facts in the story. You just need to help them tell the story. So for that, you may use guidelines. Guidelines serve the function of the rails on the stairs to avoid falling. So it's not about how you should speak about the company or write about the company, or this is rather the things that you should avoid saying. For example, to avoid a bad situation from the standpoint of compliance. There should be guidelines on how to tackle hate comments, which is imminent, which many employees run into because unfortunately the internet works this way. It's programmed to work this way. So the guidelines should ensure that when telling their story, the employee will feel safe. Shouldn't make the employee tell the story, but you should incentivize them to do that. So let's say you're working on this feature. If you don't share your story, you can forget about your job, about a job position. So fear is a bad incentive for telling a story. What? It's a clear and transparent motivation, of course. What can you use instead? There are multiple systems of incentives. They can be the financial incentive. For example, the employee may get additional bonuses if they participate in the storytelling. But you can also incentivize by saying that if you tell your story, the brand will help you with the distribution. For example, share a story and we'll post your story in our official channel. And by doing so, we'll increase your own popularity. Or another incentive could be used. You have created this feature, so share it with your friends. Your friends need to know how cool you are. Many people shy from telling a story, from telling about their achievements. They shy away from that. So it is like therapeutical work, psychological work. You need to explain that you should tell about that. What you did is really cool. You shouldn't be afraid of it. You need to be proud of what you're doing. How to start this work? It's better and easier to start your work with enthusiasts and ambassadors. 60% of people are willing to become bloggers, influencers. Some of them are already posting something. Some have Telegram channels. Others have a profile on LinkedIn, so they know how to do that. If you have such people in your team, this is the first step. They are the first ones you should start your work with because they will set the best example. They should be used for testing the motivation, the incentive systems and guidelines. Through them, you will communicate the value to others, to other employees. Do you need any specific training? Well, it depends. It depends on what you want. You can start your work through ambassadors. You can teach how to write. You can teach employees how to discover these stories that already exist. We know that they exist, but very few reflect on the stories. Well, of course, you can teach storytelling, how to build a story. There's point A, and you need to reach the destination, which is point B. So, how to pack the story into a short, interesting text. Then you can train your employees regarding the visualization. Some employees may be interested in making short reels. So you need to also offer the tools that will make storytelling easy and interesting. Personal example also works. So, for example, you can say, let's say there's a word, it consists of three letters. The first letter is C, the last one is O, and come up with all the ideas that come to mind. make a word by adding a letter. So such approaches actually work. And sometimes the C-level stories can help with the sales. And I'm not saying that CEO should sell. CEO should still talk to others by showing personal interest, by showing that they're a real person. And this is the domino effect. The more the CEO shares, the better it is in the future. And finally, you need to explain the trick. So by doing that, by sharing your stories, you will expand your network. You will get to know other specialists. You will improve your career path. That is what you can say to an employee. And HR specialists are sometimes afraid of that because the employee will become popular and immediately they will become a star and they will leave the company. Well, heads are not hunted for the stories. They are hunted because they have great skills, right? If you help someone, you may create a win-win situation and your connection with this employee will grow, will improve and as a result, this employee will stay in the company because you have helped them. And also you need to explain what is the trick for the company. In other words, why the storytelling of the employee may help the company as well. What is the danger here? The danger of silencing. It sometimes may feel that it will be difficult. The best story is the honest story, because in an honest story, there's a clear structure, there's conditional point A or and the destination point B. So you need to be honest when you explain why you need it, why you're talking about yourself. So this serves as a good incentive. And what I'd like to urge you to do, tell your story, your own story, over this weekend, at least to one person. Well, at the weekend, tell your story to anyone in a bar, tell a story to your friends, share your story in social media, post it somewhere to understand that you have a story. And I'm convinced that everyone has a unique and amazing story that happened to you this week or over the recent time. And show by your example that everyone can share good stories. Artem, I think you can take the presentation off the screen. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think your presentation was of a very practical nature. Someone is happy that you mentioned percentage. Well, Michelle is saying the blog about discovering the story was very interesting. Can you buy a story? Should all surveys, be free of charge? Well, the question is, what does it mean to buy a story? Well, if we apply it to the corporate world, and I don't mean like Netflix buying a story. Well, if an employee shares about their working processes in social media and gets a financial incentive, well, yes, we can say that through the financial support that or with the help of this financial support, as a result of the financial support, the employee shared and posted the story. Well, yes, you can pay the employee and they will share the story. But that won't be the story that people will believe in? Well, I think that you can pay for the story that was already published, but the story should be told by the person themselves. And I have a question. You mentioned the regulations, protocols, guidelines that sometimes diminish the ability to tell a story because this is a restriction, the external restriction. You need to be careful about that. So what other barriers exist within the company that prevent people from telling a story? Well, fear, of course, fear. And fear is a very comprehensive nature. So, for example, the fear that if an employee starts telling stories, they will be viewed by another company and they will leave. Or, for example, the employee will start telling a story and the employee will say the word marvelous, but marvelous is not part of the guideline. According to the guideline, you need to say the word amazing. Or the fear that you start telling a story and people will laugh at you because who am I to tell a story? So many people don't believe that their story can potentially be interesting. So you need to show people that your story is unique. Your story can be interesting, and this imposter syndrome will be overcome. Maybe you won't receive the 500 likes or 10,000 views because many of us tend to assess our success by the number of likes or the number of views. But we need to fight this imposter syndrome because many people would say, who am I to tell a story? And of course, right, there's the fear that once the employees become popular and share the stories, they will leave the company, they will be viewed by the competitors. So, right, you need to battle the fears that exist. These fears make sense in a way, but you can work with them, you can process them. Thank you. And once again, we come back to this idea that to achieve a result, first you need to create the safe psychological environment for the people. Right, I completely agree. Thank you. Many thanks. I really like the practical standpoint and the philosophical standpoint of your presentation. So my final question to you will be announced now, and you can find contact details of our speaker, Igor, in the chat. So if there were only one task that you could solve with the help of the narrative or story within an organization, what task would you choose? Oh, that's good. I have 2 minutes to think. Well, in Russia, there's the Tekmilla media that works under the non-profit organization. They share the stories, and their slogan is, we will bring you back to the journalism. We'll bring the person back to the journalism. I'm always touched by the slogan. So if I use the story to address a certain task, I would try to return a person to some place, return a person somewhere, to bring them back somewhere. Stories make stories are based on humanism. So for example, let's bring a person back to human relations. You know, at the backdrop of the AI development, we want relations and relationships to continue to be based on humanism. Thank you. I completely agree with that. The fires that are going to be burning are all for you. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge at this conference. Have a nice weekend.